Welcome everyone to this sacred conversation with Emma Pleasure. Oh my goodness, I've been getting to know Emma and it's a really amazing topic we're going to be talking about, and particularly how trauma, abuse, anything like that can affect your intimacy and sensuality and pleasure. So Emma is a trauma-informed sexologist, and I'm really excited for her to describe that it is, because it's not necessarily what you think. And she's a tantra and yoga teacher, again, showing us how Westerners have made it into something that it's actually not. We forget the bigger picture and the philosophy behind it. And she comes with a psych background. Hi, Emma, welcome.
Hello, Chantel. Thank you. What a vibrant introduction.
Thank you. Well, I just think what you're doing is, I was listening to you the other day as well when you were sharing about this, the importance of the differentiation between intimacy, pleasure, and the act of sex, which we'll be talking about if anyone's interested next year. But at the moment, we are focusing on this, and we're going to focus in this session about us as individuals. Then the next session will be about couples. And I just wanted you to start sharing what this really means.
Yeah.
And how trauma can affect it, or does affect it.
Sure. Thank you. So I think it's probably helpful to start with what I think pleasure is, as a distinction. So for me, pleasure is something that is, kind of similar to self-care. But when we do self-care, sometimes it's really about survival. We have a bath because we're really hitting the wall, or we take time out because if we don't, we're really going to yell at someone. Or maybe we've been triggered. And so the self-care that we're doing is really about bringing us back to our normal baseline. For me, pleasure is having a mindset that means that the same activity potentially is actually done with a different intention, so that we're really receiving more deeply from it. So pleasure is intuitive, it's intentional, and it's mindful. So we're slowing down, we're noticing, we can receive, and then we get more of a boost of pleasure from that activity. And it actually changes the hormones in our body so that our stress hormones reduce as the pleasure hormones go up. When we're just doing self-care and it's about survival, our stress hormones might come down, but that doesn't mean our pleasure hormones will automatically go up. It's when the pleasure hormones are going up that the stress hormones will correspondingly come down.
Oh, and when I heard you say that, I just love that. And that's why I wanted to share this with the community, and for me to hear it again, because I was using the word sensuality. So it's interesting, whereas I love the word pleasure, because the way I do it is just really feeling and touching and, as you said, mindful and aware, and what a difference that makes.
Yes. Yeah, that mindfulness. And a great example is, we can sit down at night, have a block of chocolate next to us, and we can eat the entire block of chocolate and get to the end and not really feel satisfied or have had any pleasure in that experience at all. And we can also get one square and we can savor it. And that is exquisite.
Yes.
And that's, we've consumed so much less, but the experience that we've had was a connected one.
Yes. And I'm writing these things down and I always remember my French grandmother used to say this, because my French grandmother was loved her beer, and we had a blonde or a brunette, whichever one, and à la grande place, because that's how you do it in France, that. But she always said to me, she's sitting there sipping it away, because over there they have big heads like this, not that. She goes, il faut goûter tout ça, you've got to really taste it. And I've always remembered that. Yeah. And she'd sit there and she'd literally, because the French do, you've just given me that thought, well, at the time, a lot more pleasure, the way they eat, the way they talk about food, it's that pleasure sensual.
Yes, there is a sensuality. And even as you're talking, I can see it in you, the way you're moving, the smile in your mouth, and how vibrant you're becoming as you think about it and feel that as an embodied experience. Yeah.
Yes. And I think that's the operative word, embodied experience. Because, and this is what we're going to talk about, I know for myself, so anyone who's listening, might resonate too, through trauma and childhood trauma, I was so disconnected from my body.
Yes, Absolutely. And of course, that's where the conversation is heading. And we've, as we've talked about this little bit of pleasure, sensuality has come up and intimacy has come up, which you've also brought up for me to address. And I think we've done that so perfectly that, intimacy is a form of this deep connection. Deep connection in this case, we're really talking about ourselves, but we can be intimate with ourselves, intimate with other people, and that doesn't have to have anything physical happening, but a sense of closeness and connection. And sensuality for me is information that comes through our 5 physical senses. And usually we're using that through the sense of touch. That's, I say usually in the sense that probably the ones that people know most. But people who use, for example, essential oils, they might wave an essential oil around in front of their nose. Food, as you've just been talking about, the things that we look at, and then touch, texture in particular, music. And so it's really bringing those 5 senses to life. And when we look at the impact of these domains of pleasure, intimacy, and sensuality from what trauma has meant for us, there's often a big disconnection because we've learned to shut down what the body is telling us, or to disconnect from the messages of the body, because as children, we need, and trauma that we've sustained through our childhood, we need to depend on people for our survival. And so we have to ignore the messages that our body is telling us so that we can maintain the relationship for our safety. And as adults, the same kind of pattern exists, although we're not necessarily dependent for our survival, but the same pattern where we shut down what our body is telling us and that connection, because the body or the head has to win. We can't have both, and we can't always rationalize and make sense of things. And this is just what we do to keep going.
And I'm wondering too, and I'd like to explore a bit more, even though we don't depend on survival as adulthood, but again, our bodies don't know that. Like, it's still like we are in that survival mode, aren't we?
Very much. And especially if we have had dysfunction in our upbringing and we're in a codependent kind of relationship, whether that's a one-sided codependence or, both parties are seeking for fulfillment. And I always see this like 2 little Pac-Mans, their Pac-Man's mouth is empty and this Pac-Man's trying to take a bite out of this Pac-Man so it can be a full circle. And this Pac-Man's trying to take a bite out of that one.
I love it. I love it. Because how true is that? And but it's like you keep missing, don't you? And you
That's
both
right.
end up, and that keeps that that interaction happening, that depth of it, and very
That's
hard
right.
to break away. And I'd like to also look at with that, so the word shame came into mind.
Yes.
I'd like to explore more, because I know I was shamed as a child to want anything.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And so this experience of it sounds like you might have been asking for something, and that the adults around you presumably were having a hard time managing what that meant for them. And so instead of them holding what it meant for them, that was pushed out of them onto you. And so the experience that we end up receiving is, it's bad to want. And with shame, I'm bad to want. And so then we can shut down the desires that we've got. And desire is a really big part of pleasure and intimacy and sensuality. And again, I think desire gets conflated with having an only sexual context, but we have desire for rest. We have desire for connection. We have desire to move differently through the world. We have desire to see people and be with our loved ones. So we can, and when I say these desires, they're really coming from the soul, not from our shoulds. And so shame can create conflict for us about what we think we want and what we should do so that we don't get in trouble and we're making others happy. And quite often when there's trauma and dysfunction, we end up going to what we think we should be doing. And this is where we get the patterns that we've heard about, most likely as the good girl and, perhaps the good boy, where it's really all about pleasing other people.
Yeah. And I'm really glad you explained desire, because I had no clue what desire meant. I had no clue that I could even ask for anything. Not only that, I'd never had no clue that I could actually receive it, that I deserved
Yes.
to receive it, even if it
Yeah.
was having a peach versus a nectarine. I mean, that's how basic it was. And I didn't
Yes.
even know that I desired them.
Yes. Yeah. And there's, why would we when we're not even allowed to have a need? If we're not allowed to have a need, like I need food or I need
Mm,
emotional security right now, how would we know that we desire the peach over the nectarine?
yes, that's
You
right.
know,
That's
just
right.
yes.
And it's so, and you don't know what you don't know until you know. So and that to me, and again, I'd like your thoughts on it. I call it's a practice to learn to know what you need and then to detach yourself from the guilt and shame.
Yes, absolutely. And I think those steps, I've got tingles. I think, you've touched on something really important there, that it is a practice. And that practice comes with different levels of knowing and understanding and embodiment as we get more comfortable. And I think really the first step is noticing that something isn't right for us. And so we might notice that we're in a bad mood, we're irritable, we feel down, we feel resentful or something like that. Something might have happened even 5 days ago.
Yeah.
And we haven't connected with that. And so this first stage is really, hang on, I'm noticing that there is something different going on for me. And then after we're getting better at that, we can start to consider doing something about that. And that takes practice. That's a whole journey in and of itself. And then we get to, all right, I can do something. I can say something to this person. Or hang on, I'm angry because I let my child eat the last of the cornflakes, but I really wanted some cornflakes today.
Yes, yes,
and,
yes,
and, it doesn't have to be big, because the part of us that's reacting is actually a younger part of us that is
yeah.
caught in a moment that's been triggered by a feeling state that the body remembers.
And another thing
Yes.
with that, with the mother child, having not been a mother, but again, how dare people go, how dare she want that over her child? So there's already shaming in
Yes.
there, because everything is, again,
Yes.
how dare
Yes,
you
we
have
should
your own
hand
needs?
out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it's
that's right.
interesting. And the other thing
It
that
is.
came to mind as well as you're talking about this was safety. What do
Yes.
talk a bit more about safety in a way? For me, that's part of the practice, but
Yeah.
I needed to feel really safe to really step out with my desires. Would you like to explore that more with us?
I would love to. I think that's super important. And I realize that I haven't touched on the guilt that you brought up either, which I think is a really important part of the process too. So I'd like to weave those together in my answer. So, what safety in this context means for me is about managing what our nervous system is doing and what our nervous system is responding and reacting to and about. So, the idea that we're going to say something to someone about something, like, using my flippant cornflake example, we might, or let's say it's someone ate the last bag of chips or the end of the block of chocolate or the milk's gone, whatever it is. And so when we address this with someone, we can be expecting a negative response from that person, some type
Yes.
of consequence. And this has come from a pattern of us expressing, for example, you saying, I didn't even know I could have a desire, and feeling shame for wanting. So if I'm asking for something and then I'm shamed for it, I stop asking. And so as an adult, when we need to relearn that, we're expecting that this pattern of I get in trouble because I'm putting a desire or a need or a want out there. And that comes with the guilt of, well, I'm putting myself first. I'm asking something.
Yes.
It's going to disappoint that person. They will think bad of me. They'll think I'm selfish. And so safety for me in this context is knowing that we can set ourselves up to practice the skill of getting better at this with people we know can receive it
Yes.
first. And so if we know that, for example, we're going to present that, hey, I'm really disappointed that the milk's empty and you haven't thought to go to the shops, to our partner, we might say, hey, this is really difficult for me to express. And I know it might be hard to hear. And I notice that I feel really angry. And we're not going to say this the first time, let's be honest. But I notice that I feel really angry that the milk is empty, and I wish someone else would get that for me. I mean, that's kind of at the crux of it, when we become practice, that's really actually voicing everything that's going on for us. It's hard for me to say this. It might be hard for you to hear this. So we're naming that this is a tricky conversation.
Yes.
And then the issue is the milk is gone. But the bigger issue is, I can't understand why you haven't fixed that and I'm the only adult in the house, or I've got the mental and physical load of doing that. So when the person is safe and we know that they're going to receive it, there's less work for us around managing the guilt. And so we can practice saying no to people, no to an invitation, by just saying, I can't do that this time. We don't have to give a reason. And
yes,
we just soften into that. So when we give a reason, it's kind of us trying to make sure that person understands why it's not okay. And we can help ourselves with the guilt by just stating, I can't do that this time. And, that's reason enough.
I agree with you. And I think also coming to that, I think there's also, as you say, you don't need to give a reason because we justify and all that. But it's also part of that people pleasing, not wanting to hurt them, not wanting to be abandoned or rejected either. So this is why it's so big.
Yes.
And why we say it takes practice, because it does.
Yeah, it really does. And for me personally, like years.
Yeah. And I still am. I think it's going to be ongoing, because we do go into those moments of child and then have a rant and then have the tone of voice. Because the other thing I learned too, and again, your thoughts, it's how we say something, but I've also learned the tone of voice is important.
Yes. Yeah.
And again, that takes time, because you can't be responsible for how the other person will react necessarily, but you can be responsible for you.
Yes. And I think that's it's a really clear distinction in the way that you're describing that, because we can say something and someone else can react, and they could be hearing something different, or the tone that we're using could mean something to them that we could not possibly have expected that it means. And so if we then just take responsibility of, okay, that was not my intention, but I see how it's come across that way to them, I will do my best to remember to soften it next time, or to preempt them that I have something that might be difficult to hear, or whatever it is.
And I like that, preempt, because that's another thing. Because when you just go in unsolicited, bam, here it is. Well, of course, you think of it yourself. If someone comes to you and, you feel attacked, well, what are you going to do?
Yes.
Yeah,
that's right. That's right. We call it hippo mode in our family when we go into a stress response, because the hippopotamus is the most dangerous land animal on earth. Yes. And, trying to make it, fun and something that children can connect to. So it's this whole, hey, I can see you've gone into hippo mode there. What do you need to be able to complete the stress cycle? But it's very challenging sometimes when, that part of us can react with a lot of automaticity, and then we've got to have enough consciousness to be able to come in over the top of that, to not have that be the thing that then's dictating the interaction that we're having.
And I think also two things again came to mind is, I've learned over the years, either some people will complete 100% blame, others take 100% blame. So again, it's how can you not say, oh my God, I made a mistake, or it's all my fault. It's how can I say, yes, I contributed, and go back and say, hey, I'm sorry. Yeah. And that, I'm wondering if that comes back to intimacy, that comes back to trust.
It does very much. And also the aspects that you were talking about before with shame, and recognizing that it's okay to have made mistakes, and that the humility of acknowledging that is actually really powerful. Whereas when we've been in an experience with dysfunction and trauma, quite often that is not at all powerful. That is a recipe for more pain, abandonment, shame. And so it's learning to tease apart the part of us that is taking full responsibility, because that's where blame has always gone onto us, or where we're pushing it away because it's too painful to understand that we've made a mistake. And so separating that is really asking yourself, okay, I notice that I feel like this. If I step back a step, can I see the part of this that was me doing something, and can I see the part of me that is an older part assuming responsibility because that's
Yes.
how I was taught to be.
Oh, I
And
like
again,
that.
knowing that we're not going to be able to do that straight away.
Mm.
we
Yeah,
might
again,
we might yeah we might just go, oh, I'm doing that thing again, okay. And then after a month or two of that, we might be able to sit with it a bit longer, and then we might be able to go, all right, which bit's mine, which bit's theirs. And then that might bring up guilt
yeah,
because we're not holding all the
yeah.
responsibility for ourselves. And just knowing that this is constantly retraining our brain to
Yes.
experience it differently. And as we do that, we're opening up our capacity for more pleasure and more intimacy and more safety.
And I like that. And then for me, what then came in, I'm training my brain, and then I'm also teaching my body to trust me again, and it's safe to be able to do. So I think it all
Yes.
comes in together. Yeah, I agree with you. And the other thing I know I did when, oh, two things. A sibling said to me years ago when we had all these conversations, he turned around, he says he denies it at this point, but he said, sis, content great, delivery. And if it was anyone else, they would have switched off you by now. But it was really
Yeah.
good because that stuck with me about 25 years ago, whatever he said this. And that's always stuck with me because he said, what you were content
Yes.
was great. But again,
Yeah.
it was how, and that
How
was
it was said.
how it was said. And that really got me on the trajectory. And then when I did my Gestalt therapy training, again, it taught me, okay, let's be
Yep.
aware of this. Yeah, I think
Yes. I had
that's,
that conversation with my daughter this morning. The way you spoke to me, it didn't feel very nice. But
yeah,
I'm hearing that you said this.
yes. And I like that I'm hearing you said this because that is about that acknowledgement. That is about showing
Yeah.
like you are parenting or
Yeah.
adulting or whatever you want to call that. I don't know what, to someone to say, hey, it's okay. It is okay.
Yeah.
Oh my
And I
goodness.
think that's what communication really is, isn't it? Is, I'm trying to give a message to you. And even if I don't use the right words and I don't use the right tone, can you hear my intended message to the best
Like
of your
that.
capacity?
Yes.
And then we respond with, if we're mindfully communicating and non-violently communicating, we're trying to respond with the mirroring or the rephrasing to know that the person, so that the sender can go, oh yeah, they did get what I meant. But we as the sender, we have to try to say it in a way that that person will understand it. But then it's the intended message. All right, so you spoke to me with a lot of tone and that was hurtful, but I think what you're trying to say is this.
Oh my goodness. And as you said, it sounds so logical. And I wish I was there immediately. I love that intended message. And I know coming back to what I was saying a bit before, what helped me personally. So again, anyone watching and ideas, Emma, is that I did a lot of writing. So I'd
Yeah.
perhaps write out what I needed to say. So I got all the emotion out and the anger,
Yeah.
resentment. Then I would go back and say, right, what do I want to say? What is actually important for me to say?
Yes.
And then
Yeah.
sometimes I'd even practice it, particularly if it was something really, I was very frightened. If it was someone I really was needed or thought I needed. And there was that big fear of rejection and abandonment. It was scary.
Yes. Absolutely. I love that distinction of thought I needed. That was very subtle, but very powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I recall doing something similar. I was writing in my journal. I think I'm up to about 190 journals since I was a teenager. Might be a little bit more now. And they were very well used, just, the shit that was in my mind. And I don't think they'd be very interesting to read.
No.
Though I have them all, but just, working out what it is that I feel, using the writing for processing my emotions. These days, I don't rely on that so much,
Yeah.
probably because I have so many mixed roles and I
Yeah.
have a couple of things like tapping where each point that
Yes.
I tap, I will, say the thing there. So, it might be, this is crap. This was not what I expected. I feel so annoyed. And so it's kind of like dot points that helps me verbalize
Yeah.
what I'm saying. But that's also the progression of the skill of I've got this feeling in my body, but it's not connected to any knowing in my mind. And
Yes,
then the
that's
knowing
it.
gets words through the paper and the pen without it hurting anybody because it's written just for us.
Yeah.
And then as we get better at the words, speaking becomes a much easier task as we're practicing a skill.
And I really like that, because when I think about many years ago, so showing my age, we didn't have tapping, wasn't even existed then.
Yes,
So like you said, there's so many wonderful things that have come in that, as you said, you can add, like, okay, through trauma, I wasn't able to ever visualize really. So I've understood
yes,
that now. However, what I had been able to do and do more now is I visualize the outcome. What would I like? So I was able to bring that in as well eventually as I started to heal, you know,
yes, yeah,
and, things like that. So and you find your own way. You might doodle, you might draw, you might go and stomp it out. So as you said, you find your
yes,
own ways.
yes. I did also used to play the piano and
Yes.
run. Took me an hour to play the piano to fully regulate.
Yeah.
An
Yeah.
hour. And a run was always really good. And actually, a friend said to me recently, I did not know this. A friend said that they've done some research on movement, and that research said, and I haven't gone to look it up, that research said that running was the only physical activity that truly regulated
Hmm.
the physical body. So I'm curious to look into that. There's certainly
Hmm.
many other techniques, but they're not exercise related, even though we're completing the stress response cycle in the body. And perhaps that's also something really important to bring into this conversation, because so much of trauma can be held in the body. And so if we're in a stress response, we can't kind of action some of these steps.
Right. That's right. That's right. And when you're in it, that's right. Not only you can't action, you actually don't know. You're so you're so discomfort. There's nothing you can't, um, until you actually step out of it. That's right. It's
Yes.
and I think coming back to running, that's interesting, because I've never run for
Yeah.
various reasons. So I do. So for me, I'd be saying also, what about fast walking or walking? So it's
Yes.
interesting whether it's specific to running or is it actually
Yeah.
that movement. Um, yeah, so I'd be interested to hear more about that, Emma.
Me too, because I would have thought that it was just bilateral movement because that's using both hemispheres of the brain.
Yes,
But I
yes,
wonder if in running, because traditionally, if you watch animals in the wild when they've had a stressor,
yeah,
they will shake
yes,
to complete the
get it all out.
cycle. So I
Mm.
wonder if the running just is closer to, like, shaking is actually fast.
It is
Anyway,
actually.
I'm going to look it up.
I would too, and it's interesting you say that, because that'll perhaps come back to intimacy. Because when my partner and I were in India, and you can just see the tiger right at the back there.
Yes.
There's a photo we took, and we watched actually one tiger actually getting ready to pounce. So using his sympathetic, or her,
Yes.
and then, like you said, shake, and then pausing. See, that's the bit we forget, is the parasympathetic. Is then he just, or
Yes.
she just sat there. You could see for
Yes.
how long. Now, I'm wondering, how could we relate this back to intimacy? Because I think if we're always on high alert, how do we then connect to what we need?
Yes.
This
Yes.
comes back to
And
that pleasure.
it is absolutely. So with the understanding and definition of pleasure that I use, it's actually really bringing us back to our core needs and desires. And the activities that come from that place tend to be things that will regulate us. So
Mm.
if I said to you, if you could have any one thing right now, what would it be?
Hmm. A juicy peach.
I love the synchronicity of that, right? So it might just be a
Yeah.
cup of tea.
Tea.
It might
Read
be,
my book.
yep, stepping outside.
Yeah.
Um, if people say something big like a holiday, we're hearing a system that is overworked and exhausted. Usually, this question will elicit something that is quite small, but shows you that actually the things that our body really wants doesn't have to be grand. It doesn't have to be a five-star hotel. And so if we get an answer to that question that you can't do right now, ask again. Okay, I can't go to the theme park today. So if I could have any other one thing, what would it be? Oh, I'd like my bare feet on nature. Okay, I can do that. Or it's a little bit cold for that. So what would the next best thing be? So what we're doing is we're getting an answer that comes from within us, and that is going to
Yes.
essentially give our body a pause, and that will help us regulate. So these types of activities that are slowing our system down is so much a part of activating the parasympathetic when we're living constantly in sympathetic and when sympathetic is driving. So us. So if we liken this to breathing, we
Mm.
breathe in, we breathe out. We've all seen people go, when they're releasing something. And so, if we think about structured activity or our sympathetic state as being the breath in, and say we've got a busy day and we go from the doctor's appointment to the grocery store, we've just breathed in, and then we go to the grocery store and we breathe in again. And then we have to go pick up that from that shop, we breathe in again. And then we had to go drop that off over this place to get fixed, and we breathe in again, but we haven't breathed out yet.
Yes, yes. And I could
And
actually feel my body tensing up
me
as you
too.
did that. I could really feel that. That's right. And actually, on that point, I can remember my meditation teacher telling us years ago about breath. Now, coming back to what you're saying, between each task. So when you finish a task,
Yes,
pause and breathe properly. So
yes,
exactly, I was listening to going, could you just please breathe and one can do
yes,
the next? And it's as simple as
yes.
that.
But that is our day, and that is how most of us live. And
That's
that's
right.
what it's like to be in sympathetic and have sympathetic run the show. There is no pause, there's no transition moment between one activity
Yes.
and the next. So the pause and the transition moment is the out breath. So that might be as that simply might be in this activity. Okay, I've done my appointment. Now I'm getting groceries. Before you get out of the car, just take a few deep breaths.
Yes.
And when you have packed your groceries and you get back in the car or you had to go to another shop, it can, again, just simply be a few deep breaths. And I know there's one spiritual teacher whose name I can't remember. They talk about when you're opening a door, using that as a transition moment.
Yes.
So
Yes.
this transition moment is your out breath. And so to balance parasympathetic and sympathetic, we can start to build in, all right, I'm structuring something, and then I give myself a moment to pause. And that just might be going to get a cup of tea and pausing for the 5 minutes that it takes to drink it. And
Yes.
yeah, and the next time might be just, pausing if we're learning to connect with the messages that our body is telling us, especially to build more pleasure and intimacy and sensuality. Your pause might be, I'm going to feel the chair beneath me or the floor beneath me. Because as we said at the start, we might be disconnected from our body. And so much of this is embodied experience, which means recreating a connection of safety and trust with our body. And we do that in increments. Notice the things that are obvious. I can feel the chair beneath me. It's pressing into my thighs. I can feel where my hip bones press in. I can feel the pressure from the floor and the parts of my feet that are meeting that. And so
Yes.
we can physically feel those,
Yes.
right?
And I was thinking also, it could be also like even staying, I've completed my shopping. I can pause and breathe. So you're creating that
Yeah.
space to then go on to the next thing. So as you said, you refine it. And I was going to say with the cup of
Yes.
tea, initially you might just go and get the cup of tea. Then the next time you might say, I'm going to actually pause and enjoy the cup that I've chosen,
Yes.
the tea that I
Yes.
want to have. So as you said, we can
Yes.
expand on this. It's really, yeah, there you go. Well, at the moment I've just got this, my my water. Yes, exactly right. So why did you
Yeah.
choose that mug? So ask yourself, why did you choose that mug? Do you have a favorite mug? Why? Who gave it to you? Is there, again, it
Yes.
creates that and a beautiful energy around it, like you said. Oh my
That's
goodness, we
right.
could talk on and on, I'm sure,
We
Emma.
could. We could.
As we're
Yes.
coming to the end, so two things. I'd like you just to say, what would you like to end with? How can people contact you?
Yeah.
And then I'm going to suggest to people to subscribe and hit notifications, because we will be doing the next one where it'll be about bringing the same conversation into relationships, intimate relationships, and also with friendships, and just how do we take that out there.
Yeah. Yeah, which is an important extension of, learning these skills and applying them into our interactions in the world, right?
Yeah.
And that's really what this is all about, is learning a new way to be. So first question, what would I like to leave people with? Okay, make it doable.
Yes.
If it's not doable, you are not going to do it.
Do it. Yeah.
So pleasure does not have to be something expensive or big or grand or fancy. It can be completely simple, like that square of chocolate. It could be a touch of your skin if you moisturize yourself when you get out of the bath, slow it down, feel the touch, enjoy the touch. So but whatever it is, it's not a should. There's no rules. Make it doable so you actually do it.
Yeah. Love it. No shoulds, no rules. That's right. And
That's
how can
right.
they contact you? Now, remind everyone, it's Emma Pleasure.
Yes. So it is Emma.pleasure on Instagram. And Facebook will not let me change my name right now. So it is Emma McCann Coach.
Okay.
At
And
Emma
again,
McCann Coach.
Emma McCann, what I'll do is, everyone, I'll pop the links in there so you know how to spell it and where to look and all the rest. And again, anyone who wants to make comments, if anything's triggered, please go and seek support. You're not alone, and reach out if you need to. So thanks again, Emma. Really, really appreciate it. I got a lot from that, a lot of wonderful reminders and additions. So thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And thanks, everyone.